Hey guys, we are live from Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us. And today we've got an interesting filmmaker joining us, Vipal Monga, coming to us from Toronto. Hey Vipal, how are you doing?
Morning. How you doing?
Great. We've already got a handful of live watchers coming in from some other shows. So keep in mind we're live and people can comment. And let me turn off my other noise here. Okay. So the reason I invited Vipal to be on the show today is because I discovered an amazing documentary he made. And it was actually about 2015 you made that documentary?
Was it? No, 2000. I filmed it in 2005. I think it came out in
10,
2010,
20
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
So I'm flipping around one of my streaming services one day. I type in jazz. Is there anything about jazz to watch? And this documentary came up that I'd never heard of. It was called Black February, and it's the story of this amazing musician named Butch Morris. And shame on me for having never heard of Butch Morris as a self-proclaimed jazz expert. Not really jazz, but we'll get into that. But I'm just going to let Vipal tell us, first of all, what is special about Butch Morris that we need to know about?
Well, there's many special things about Butch Morris. He's a lovely human being. But what's special about his music is he developed a form of improvisation that really hadn't been tried before. As you know, jazz is improvised music usually. There's big band jazz as well. And what Butch did was decided to conduct live improvisations, live conducted improvisations. So he had a bunch of hand signals that he would teach his musicians. And then on any given performance night, they'd all show up on stage, had no idea what they were going to play, no sheet music, and he would conduct them through an improvisation based on his hand signals, often to amazing effect. I mean, the music he created would surprise him, the audience, and also the musicians, which was probably the most beautiful thing about it.
And excuse me. And so, how did you hook up with him? How did he come to your attention, and why did you decide that he was documentary worthy or film worthy?
Yeah. So I met him soon after I moved to, about 4 or 5 years after I moved to New York City. And, I was sort of into jazz and the downtown scene there. And I knew a lot of the musicians. And I went to a couple of his shows and I was quite blown away by the impact of it. I think the first ensemble of his I saw was called Skyscraper, which is about 30 musicians. It's loud, it's cacophonous. Well, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's like a lot of noise. It's very dense. And then I saw a few other quieter ensembles he did. I think he did a show backing up Henry Threadgill, which was also phenomenal. And
he's in your movie, by the way.
Yeah, and Henry is obviously Pulitzer Prize winning and great. I mean,
one of the greats still around.
One of the greats, yeah, one of the greats. And so, I was making film at the time, and I was really interested in the interplay between Butch and the musicians and learning about how that process happened. So we got to talking. I filmed one of his shows, a Chinese New Year show that he did called Sheng Orchestra, which included Asian musicians and African musicians who had never met each other. Many of them had never met each other. And he put them on stage together and created this beautiful piece.
Were all those shows Conduction, or were they composed?
All Conduction. Yeah, okay. All Conduction. I mean, he just composed live was the way he looked at it. And we can get deeper into that whole relationship between him and the musicians and the music, which is fascinating and deep.
And that's where what your documentary goes into is how he talks to, directs, teaches, chides, scolds his musicians into bringing out some amazing music.
Yeah.
So he's passed away, unfortunately, just a few years after the documentary came out. Did you or anyone else catalog his list of instructions? Is anyone carrying that legacy and trying to do that anymore?
There's actually a manual, and I can put the link in the chat later, where people have put out sort of like a workbook, a textbook that he was working on for a while before his death, and then the editors and a couple of friends helped put it together. I believe it's available on Amazon, but I'll put the link in. And it's detailed instructions on his technique.
Interesting. I wonder if anybody's actually out there doing it that we're aware of, though?
There are actually.
Composing or performing.
There are. I have a dear friend of mine who's also an amazing trumpet player in her own right, Stephanie Richards, who's now teaching University of Washington in Seattle, I believe. She was at UC San Diego. And Stephanie's been doing conductions, and there's people in New York sort of keeping the whole the flame alive.
We'll have to check that out. Do we know how he went? Well, he kind of started out as a jazz and free jazz cornetist, and he's got a number of records from that period. I listened to a few that are really interesting. Do we know how he went from I'm a jazz sideman to I'm creating this whole new thing? Is there an origin story?
Well,
developed?
Yeah, I think he was just interested in sort of going beyond like established structures. I mean, he was the definition of an out of the box thinker, Butch, and he tells a story, and it's in my documentary, of being in a composition class, and he was looking at, I think it's Beethoven. It might have been some other composer, but he was like, what if I took this little bar of music and just moved it to a different place in the composition? Or what if we improvised on top of this little beautiful phrase? And he went to his teacher and talked to her about that. And she was like, well, if the composer wanted to have done that, they would have written that. And then Butch, as he says in the movie, goes, what if I'm the composer and the conductor? And so he, at that point, started thinking about how to develop this sort of germ of an idea he had. I think Leonard Bernstein had done similar things, maybe. And then it was sort of in the air. Butch was experimenting with this. John Zorn at the time was also using sort of a way of playing a game on stage, using signs and symbols to like improvise, called Cobra. So I think within that context, he sort of helped develop it in his mind.
And yet the results are amazing. I listened to everything I could get my hands on of his after I watched the movie, and each one is just a completely unique musical experience. Some of it feels like jazz, some of it feels like modern classical. I read somewhere that he's conducted, was it 5,000 or 50,000 musicians in his career, and done this conduction so many times. Unfortunately, only a few of them are on record, I guess.
I mean, the real, unfortunately, because Butch is dead, but the real beauty of it was watching it live. I mean, the records are great, and there's some fantastic recorded moments, but seeing it live is a whole other element, which is why I'm glad that the film got made and we actually finished the film, because it gives people some sense of what it might have been like live.
Yeah,
but
the energy in the room to feel a piece of music coming to life that never existed before and will never exist again.
Exactly.
Sounds like an amazing experience. Do we know if he started the compositions with an outline in mind, a sketch, or he just got up there and winged it? I don't know.
I mean, I would call it winging it. But he would not have a sketch. He would have no idea. Usually, okay, so let me give you guys a bit of a primer on his signs. I mean, I'm not a conductor or anything, but he had different signs. So this sign, when he would go like this to the musicians, means sustain. So play one sound and sustain it, a sustained sound. You'd often start with that. Point to certain musicians in the ensemble, sustain, and they would play a note. And from there, he would start developing. This means develop. So take that sound and improvise it, develop it, build it out. And if he liked it, he would go this, which means repeat, and ask another musician to repeat that phrase. It's up to the musician how they interpreted that phrase. And from there, he would start building out the conduction. So it's very much giving instructions, but also reacting to what he called the information, the musical information that the musicians gave him. And then he would send it back to them. And, it's like, it's an imperfect analogy, but it's sort of like a game of telephone where each person would interpret it slightly different. And from that organic conversation, you'd end up with a piece of music.
And some of these musicians were from a jazz background, some were classical. The ones that you interacted with in the making of the movie, did they have a common background? Was it jazz people one night and ethnic folk the next night? Or give me a feel of the mixture of diverse musicians.
I mean, it was New York, so a lot of them were from the downtown jazz scene in the film. But there were poets. He would often just work with poets and have them sort of give their poetry and use that as a conduction and to some remarkable effect. Um, there were funk musicians, rock musicians. I think it was all over the gamut. Butch very much, and I believe this too. We often subscribe to what Ornette Coleman used to say, that the genre might be different, but all the notes are the same. Just matter how you mix the notes. So I don't think they were as limited by the genre. Obviously, jazz musicians are much more open to improvisation, so it was easier to work with them. And Butch would often complain that he would talk to a classical musician or a classical group that he'd be working with in Italy or Istanbul or wherever he was, and it would be really difficult for them to improvise, to sort of break out of the box and start kind of bringing their own interpretation to music. And that was often like the biggest hurdle he faced with non-jazz, non-improvising musicians.
I don't know if it's a mistake to even call his music jazz. I mean, it sort of fits there. I found it by searching the word jazz, but I don't think he wanted the music necessarily to be called any specific genre.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, it's kind of limiting to label music in that way, probably. And I think it's become over time less and less, like our music is just a melange of things at this point, which is lovely and great. But he came from a jazz background, like he told me these amazing stories of, because he's from California, from Long Beach, and telling these amazing stories of going to see Coltrane play, and how like when he was a kid, and how like he was, he's a very talkative guy, but he said that he was just like struck dumb by like the beauty of late Coltrane that he saw, or going to see Miles and stuff. So it was very much steeped in jazz.
And I don't think he had any, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, standout players of such monolithic greatness and importance in his bands that they stood out, and maybe to the point where it was too much of them. And maybe I'm wrong. Did he have any really standout players who sort of dominated?
He played with Dave Murray. That's where he started his conduction. He's a saxophone player. He's an amazing musician. And David's interpretations of some of Butch's compositions are great. There's one you should search out called Red Car. Fantastic Butch Morris composition that is in my film as well, but David Murray's big band does a great job on it. And then Alice Coltrane, he worked with Alice Coltrane a little bit. Gil Evans, he was in Gil Evans's ensemble, I believe, for a minute. So a lot of people, but really, when he was conducting, it was a Butch Morris conduction, ultimately.
Right. The Butch Morris show.
Yeah.
So did you get to spend a lot of time with him and get to know him personally? It sounded like you did.
Yeah, I mean, I still miss that guy every day. He was a really beautiful human being. Named my son after him. I mean,
Really?
There's a deep relationship. Yeah.
Lawrence or Butch?
Morris, actually. My son's third name. Morris.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense too. So, what is your background in terms of? You seem to be a big jazz fan like me. You also have a different career, which as a journalist, Wall Street Journal. Kind of like me, I make my real money doing insurance and financial planning, which is much better way than playing with jazz. So, were you a musician at one point, or just a fan?
I've never been a musician, but I love music, like deeply love it. And so that's kind of what drove me to it. I also like making films, and I grew up making films. I haven't been doing that lately. I've been really actually just taking more still photography than anything. And I'm a writer. I write. I am a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal covering Canada, which has been an interesting, I call it my side hustle, but I love my job too. So it's a bit of everything. It's kind of a privilege to meet people like Butch and other people, artists like that, because they teach you, and I think the real artists teach you that it's not just about the jazz or the music you're making or the article you're working on or the financial planning you're doing in any given moment, that your whole life is part of your work, like your experience of just being alive in the world, and what an amazing and beautiful thing it can be. And the art that they create or you create is a kind of a door to that understanding of the beauty and the deep mystery of just existing. So yeah, I try to hold that close. I mean, it's easy to forget in your day-to-day kind of life, making your coffee or, gathering your kids. But at the same time, you still get these little windows and you kind of just understand that it's a beautiful thing where
That is kind of a poetic way of describing how many of us are trying to get by in both the commercial world and enjoying and perceiving art. But and maybe part of what you and I both do a little bit, not to compare myself, but keeping the legacy of some of these people going and bringing it to a wider audience. That's probably one of your motivations for doing this film. That's my motivation for spending my whole Saturday, Sunday, getting involved in stuff like this, because it's like his legacy almost went away, and I didn't know about him. And then one day I just magically popped upon your thing, and now I'm trying to share it with some of my people. But about his legacy, I don't know how well your film did, but like I don't even see it on IMDb. I don't
I think it is
website.
I am, but
and the website seems to be messed up, or
it's a little messed up. Yeah, I got hacked, so I had to build. I had to put a hyphen in the middle of my website. It's black hyphen
two
Feb.
websites.
Yeah,
Black Feb and Black hyphen Feb.
Yeah, black.
I understand there's not a huge budget for this sort of thing. Once
yeah,
done and over.
And the film did really well, I think, for what I wanted to do. So I didn't go into this with ambitions of like creating a blockbuster. That wasn't sort of my motivation. And in some ways it was like a anti-corporate kind of agenda to some extent. I didn't want to necessarily sell this thing or market it like in a way. Like I was able to get distribution through a company called Collective Eye. They've been fantastic and really supported the film and got it into schools. And they also have put it on the Canopy streaming service, which is, I guess, where you
that's
found
right. That's where I found it. Canopy.
And it's been great. I think very much the film will appeal most to students of music, and so getting it into schools has been fantastic. And I keep, running into people or getting emails from people who've been introduced to Butch in that setting. It's, I think, the perfect way to sort of.
I hadn't thought of that. Not trying to criticize. I'm just kind of bemoaning. It's hard to keep these ideas out there floating around.
Yeah, I'm a little more chill about it. It's like the ideas will get out there, and the ones, I'm maybe fatalistic about it. The ones it's supposed to get to, and where the seed is supposed to land and take root, it will, and it has, and I think that's been kind of a great thing. Butch he was such a character, but he had chances to sort of like sell out. You know what I mean? Like he was, I think, the movie Kansas City, the Altman film. At one point, he was commissioned to be the composer for that, but he quit. He just didn't feel like it was for him. David Murray at times had suggested, like, he sell his songs or maybe help him make more money, but he never went that route. He just wanted to keep the purity, the essence of it as pure as he could. And he suffered financially for it, but he was a very happy man. So that, I think that was more important to him.
I guess that's all that matters in the end.
Yeah.
Plenty of people selling millions of records out there that aren't happy once they find out that the record company took 99.9% of the money.
Is it, what's that line that David Byrne used, which I love, is like always for love, never for money. That's one of his lyrics, and I think it's important.
For artists, I don't know about us guys with mortgages and kids. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Can we talk about a little bit more of your film career? I did some research on you. I found some what looked like very early indie films, or maybe even school films of yours. that are still out there. Some of them are kind of interesting. It sounds like you started out as a film person before you ended up in journalism. Maybe that's not correct.
I think journalism was like my job. And I did make a lot of like self-produced indie films. I made one video for Arcade Fire, the indie rock band. I know those guys from way back, so it was kind of fun to do
that one.
Them. I made a short film that I really love, and that won a couple of awards in New York festivals, called Down, which was dance improvisation that my amazing friend Ty Jimenez. She was the prima ballerina at the Boston Ballet for a minute. She danced with Prince. I mean, she was all over the place.
That one I would touch on that one, because that was the one that stood out to me. I watched everything I could get my hand on, and that one stood out.
In that video, what we did was, she was doing these dance improvisations in the New York City subway. She would just dance, and we filmed it. And then we put some my friend Qasim Naqvi and Shahzad Ismaili. Shahzad, who's just, I think last year had a New York Times profile written about him. He has played with everyone, Yoko Ono and Bob Dylan. I mean, Shahzad's like a major, and Qasim is like a very good, very well-known electronic musician in his own right. The two of them had done some drum improvisations.
So she wasn't hearing the music live when she was dancing.
She was not.
Added that after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing.
It's a beautiful dance, and I think the part of the impact of the film is the reactions, the diverse reactions on people's faces. You're in the New York subway. Some people are like, quit bugging me. I don't need this BS. I'm trying to get to work. Other people were amazed and enjoying it, and other people were. Someone even mocked her at one point at the end that was less appreciative.
Well, I mean, I think the mocking actually in that part
maybe it was appreciative. I don't know.
Well, it was her way. It was again. We should have a link for the people watching this, so they can.
I can put those in the show notes afterwards.
But so this dance improvisation at the end, Ty does a dance improvisation, and at the end, there's a girl who's been watching it, and she kind of does a mocking dance, kind of imitating Ty. We thought about that a lot, and it wasn't mocking as much as giving herself the permission to do something similar. Okay. It's scary for people to
interpretation
and make
the negative.
So anyway, take it back to Butch. He was like a major artist, I think, because he wasn't just about the music for him. The music was really important, obviously, but so in this process I described of conducting musicians, often he would end up in a confrontation with musicians. The confrontation being like, he would either shut out a musician who thought they were like doing some amazing piece of music, or you kind of yell at them, look at me, give me more. And he would always just like get into this dynamic with people where he was kind of cajoling them. There's a confrontation, and Butch was very conscious of what was happening. And what he was trying to do was get people to step out of their comfort zone, to find like a deeper truth in the moment where they're improvising. Because often musicians will like sort of go back to their stock phrases when they're improvising, or be kind of lazy about it. And he didn't want that. He wanted people to be alive in the moment, giving him like a real expression of who they were. And that's a hard thing to ask for someone. I mean, that's like really kind of like presumptuous. But he would try to force people to do that. And so I think that sense of confrontation was really integral to what he was doing. And I think that's really at the core of a lot of like major art. It forces you to kind of break out of like the miasma of your like daily life and like look at the moment, and that can be tough.
And there's a number of segments of those interactions in the film that are very telling, where he kind of has to get into people's faces to tell them to do something different, do something better.
Right.
And there's a lot of faith on the part of the leader who says, I know you've got more in you, even though I've only known you for 2 minutes, I'm pretty sure there's more in you if you bring it out, and that's a mark of great leaders, conductors, directors, CEOs, whatever you want. Any leadership position is there are people out there who have talent, but they need somebody to push them to that next level. When you have
Yeah,
20 people doing it at once, it can be an amazing experience.
Butch used to tell me sometimes, like, he goes, you'd use the analogy of like how you can only create a diamond by putting pressure on it. So sometimes he said that people need pressure, and I'm happy to provide that pressure. We're not afraid of providing it, maybe more accurately. So he would do that. And sometimes he would just like go after people, even if the music was okay and he liked it, just to get them to like break through. And some musicians refused to play with him after one or two times. It was just like, I'm not, I don't want to deal with his bullshit, So that can be tough. It was tough for some.
I was going to say, did you get to speak to musicians who said, I'm scared of him, or I'm uncomfortable with this? Or it sounds like you're not going to name names, but I've been in that situation, not quite to the level of, let's say, Whiplash, the movie, but it can be very intimidating.
I hate that movie. It's awful. But anyway,
my review is it's a horror movie that happens to take place in a jazz school as opposed to a jazz movie.
Yeah,
if you want realistic jazz, that's not what Hollywood's for.
It's a sports movie. It's really a sports movie that has nothing to do with like the spirit.
It could have been a football team.
Yeah,
take the most intense football coach you've got out there and put him in front of a jazz band.
Right.
But the jazz teacher that I had when I was in school called me out in front of people all the time because I was the soloist, and it was extremely intimidating, embarrassing, humiliating, and yet I went on to do some pretty good things and became the star. But so I'm seeing it from the musician's point of view, where I'm glad he pushed me that hard, and some people would have given up and ran away, crying and screaming. So
yeah, I mean, no one
there's
likes
a duality there.
You don't want to be called out. Yeah, it can be tough, and there's no right. Butch was never abusive, and he was, had a great deal of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And after the show was over, often, everyone just kind of leave it on the stage, so to speak. But it really is an exercise in like being egoless, leaving, kind of shedding your ego and not making it personal about your performance, but about the performance of the entire ensemble. That can be hard. It's a lot to ask.
So is there a Butch Morris estate or a group of people carrying on both his legacy and the financial stuff and the record releases and so forth? Are you in contact with any of these people? I'm just wondering where it's going now that he's gone.
His son Alexander is in charge of the estate, and frankly, I'm not sure where things stand at this point. I'm not really in touch with Alexander. There's been some talk of taking some of the music that was recorded during the Black February sessions and putting them out on CDs. And I think there's one attempt underway right now to do that, just trying to get releases from people who performed on that gig. So I'd like to see some of that come to light. That'd be great. I mean, that'll happen kind of despite me. All I have to do is sign off on giving them the recording that I have, and I'm happy to do that.
Well, I'd love to see some of those records come out. I saw a bunch of them under the name of New Blue Orchestra.
Yeah.
New Blue. I'm sorry. Is that is his creation? That's not an orchestra.
Well, New Blue is a great venue in New York, and those musicians, they had their own house band, and the house band played with Butch. So it's a New Blue Orchestra. And that shit was so funky. It was great. It was so great. And Butch really liked those guys. They're all cool hip kids, and he got some great music out of them.
They seem to have a lot of records available.
They do, and they do a bunch of conductions. My friend Brandon Ross, who's a fantastic guitar player in his own right, he's been doing some conductions. Graham Haynes, who's a cornetist, and Roy Haynes' son, also does conductions. And he played a lot with Butch. I mean, all those
Butch.
guys kind of love Butch. Butch was this great character in the 80s in New York. He dressed really great. He had amazing personality, very charismatic. A lot of them kind of wanted to be like Butch, so he had that kind of swagger. Um, and
It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
I didn't know he had followers like that.
yeah.
I didn't know Roy Haynes just passed away 2 weeks ago at the age of 99. Didn't quite make it to 100.
Right.
So his son must be up there in age too, late
Yeah,
70s,
I
early
don't know how
80s.
old Sam is, but he's great. He's a really
Yeah.
amazing musician as well. I mean, New York is such a great place because all those people are there. They're just there. So you meet them, and you can really tap into that creative energy.
I'm in Los Angeles, which claims to be the music capital of the world, but is a wasteland in many respects,
Just more spread out, I think.
as you may know.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have the great clubs. We have a few clubs, but we don't have anything like a jazz club scene. There's a few spread out here and there, but there's no group of people coming together, still creating great stuff. In my opinion, they're all Anyway, we don't have to go on to my opinion of LA. I've been to New York. I've been to some jazz clubs, and it's a different vibe, obviously.
Yeah, it's different. It was even different in the 80s when there were way more clubs and the loft scene that was happening there. I mean, all that, it's easy to be nostalgic for a time that's gone by, but I still think I'm very hopeful about like people's ability and willingness to get together and make shit. And they'll keep doing that somehow, whether it's on the internet or in clubs. They'll figure it out. We do that. That's what
the world changes and the club scene is gone, but the internet scene is here. It's just the way it is. So are you not working on any new films now?
I am not right now. The last films I made a few pieces for Steph Richards for her piece, and those were more like abstract sort of short films that she played behind her when she was doing a series of concerts, and I think those turned out well. I made a short documentary about a Mr. New York, it was called. It was about a Tibetan bodybuilder who used to be a Bollywood star, and it was like a short film about him, Mr. New York, which was great.
I think I saw a note about that. I saw you did something with Ken Butler, who's on my list of 200 people to interview someday, and he's created like all these crazy imaginative instruments out of junk found around the house type thing.
He made a guitar out of an umbrella. He's pretty great. Ken's great. I made a short film about all his like beautiful instruments. Yeah, they're great. He played with Butch too. It was funny, like I keep meeting people that have played or knew Butch, and often the reaction is like tears, at this human being that we lost. But we're lucky to know.
Well, you're not going to believe this, but I'm at the end of my list of questions. But the last one, I'm a huge record collector. Do you collect records? Do you like or care about vinyl at all? Are you part of this whole vinyl thing that's going on?
I have a lot of vinyl, yeah. I'm not an audiophile hugely, but I have a lot of great records. And I don't mind listening to like digital files at all. But I definitely notice when the sound is warmer, I can a richer sound always helps. And then there's something like really tinny about like a crappy like compressed MP3, which kind of drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's a shame that we have a whole generation of music listeners hearing MP3s instead of.
Well, maybe I on some level, some of the music is actually richer. Like I know Lou Reed hated vinyl because you couldn't get the bass. If the bass was too rich, it would like cause a needle to skip. So he was, a big fan of like digital music. It just allows you to get deeper into the sound on some level. So yeah, I mean, there's the important thing is the music.
Yeah, there's pluses or minuses. I'm even though I have started this channel about vinyl, I listen to CDs, I listen to digital, I have 78s and cassettes, and the best way to listen to music is live, which is harder to do.
Yeah, it's harder.
But so I'm not a vinyl purist in that sense, but
I was listening to some Don Cherry record this morning on vinyl, and it was lovely. It was like his. Do you know Don Cherry stuff at all? Another
Yeah,
trumpet
yeah, yeah.
cornet.
Used to play with
His stuff,
Ornette.
yeah, with Ornette. Oh. And then his duet with Ed Blackwell, who might be my favorite drummer. That record, El Corazon, I believe it's called, is
Is that the black and white cover on ECM?
it's a brown
Oh, that's
cover.
the Carla Bley.
Yeah, and it's so good. But I was listening to it on vinyl, and it sounded just lovely in the morning. I highly recommend that record if you guys haven't heard it.
I may have it. I'll have to check, but I'll double check. I get more than I can keep track of, and more than I have time to listen to.
Butch used to tell me the story about in the 70s, Don Cherry used to roller skate around the East Village playing his cornet. And all those. I mean, New York in the 70s in many ways was like this bleak landscape. Everyone talks about how like the streets would glisten with like broken like heroin like syringes, and later on crack pipes and stuff. But there was also this amazing like melting pot of like real creative energy. So arguable you wouldn't have had one without the other, which is like great irony of life, I guess.
Yeah, that's what pumps the energy into a great music scene with all its eccentricities and characters. And a lot of us that are nostalgic for vinyl, the good old days,
Right.
it's because of those scenes existed, whether it was the 50s and 60s, and all these different scenes. We had it in LA. We don't have it anymore. Anyway.
Do you have like tube amps and stuff? Are you like that far down? And
Do I have what?
do you like tube amps and like how far?
Oh yeah, I do. I have a tube preamp on one of my nicer stereos. I have 3 guitar tube amps, but I'm not fanatic about anything. It's like I'm a fanatic about getting a good deal. So I got a good deal on this. I have like 4 sound systems. The really nice one, the pretty nice one, the one that I let my wife and kid play with, the one that I don't let them play with. But yeah, I went deep into audiophilia for a while. It's a very expensive hobby with diminishing marginal returns.
Right.
Oh, I got this cable. It's 1/1000% better. Okay, I hear it. There's a lot of snake oil
Right.
in the audiophile world, and ultimately, it has to be about the music, not about
It has.
gear.
I have been getting into like Chinese hi-fi stuff.
But yeah, chi-fi we call it.
Hi-fi, yeah. I got a pair of like $80 headphones, which are like fantastic, like little earbuds, and they've been great. Wired, of course, but
But not the
yeah,
tube amp.
I'll go. No, too bad.
I started researching that because you can get a $200 tube amp that's a Chinese copy of a $5,000 American one.
Right.
Well, the parts aren't as good and the tolerances aren't as good, and it might blow up. But if you know how to fix the broken solder joints, you might come out okay. I started to research that, and since I already have like 5 stereos, I'm not sure the family wants another one.
Well, but you're right. Go see live music, folks. It's the best way to listen to music.
I think that's about a wrap, Vipal. You've been wonderful in sharing your time with us and letting us know about the great story of Mr. Butch Morris. The film is called Black February. It's also got a subtitle, right? Black February something.
Music is an open door.
Music is an open door. Came out in 2010 or 15. 10.
2010, yeah.
And it's available on Canopy, which I got from my public library. I think it's available on Amazon Prime. And
Canopy, it was on Prime for a bit. I don't know if it's still. Okay. I kind of lost touch a little bit. But it's definitely on Canopy. Canopy is great. Support your local libraries. And you should, feel free to share my email address with folks if they have trouble accessing and want to see the movie.
Yeah, I will update the show notes on this with a few links. And I thought I had a great closing, which I can't remember now, other than saying thank you. And I think that covers it, guys, unless there's anything else. I don't have any questions from the audience here, even though we have a lot of people making comments. No, we don't have any actual questions. So I think we'll wrap it then.
I want to say thanks so much for doing this. There's deep love for Butch and what he was trying to do that I have, and it's really moving that people are still reacting to it, and I really appreciate you doing this. So thanks so much.
Yeah, just a random find of the internet turned into a nice discovery of a wonderful musician and a great documentary. So with that, we will wrap. And I did want to say I put your entire trailer on my YouTube channel with a super quick introduction, so people can watch that also. But check out the movie and the records if you can find them.
Great.
All right, Vipal, thank you.
Thanks. That's my son.
Talk soon.
Talk to you later. Bye.